everybody, and welcome to the Human Echoes podcast.
I'm Tony Southcott.
I am Albert Berg, and we're coming to you this week with a special episode, a little point 5 action for you, covering a movie that we've been anticipating for months and months now, Tony, The Krampus.
It's the first major motion picture featuring the Krampus that I know of. We've been kind of in love with it since we read The Yule Lord by Brahm. And this isn't that story, but it's definitely a Krampus story.
And I have a little bit of mixed emotions about this one, Tony. This is one of those situations where I like this movie in theory. Like, if I explained to myself without having seen it all of the things that are in this movie, I would think, like, this movie's going to be amazing. This is great. But in practice, sitting in the theater, I was kind of like, I didn't quite completely get hooked in. It was an odd experience for me.
I was pretty well hooked. Like, it wasn't anything that was like the most spectacular thing ever, but I felt like it was a pretty strong effort for a Christmas horror movie. Like, it wasn't scary per se, but it definitely had a consistent level of action. It was interesting, had a decent enough story, was shot really well, and the creature effects definitely were on point.
Well, yeah, and I think the creature effects are a real strong point of this movie. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I think maybe for me the problem was tonal, because this movie starts out with quite a bit of comedy, and not just like any comedy, but a lot of really broad comedy. You know, it's these two families coming together, and you have like almost the Home Alone style. They're at each other's throats, and all the kids are fighting and stuff. And then there's this shift as the movie happens. It's like really early in Act 1 or Act 2 when everything starts to go to crap because the Krampus is coming. And there's still humor in it, but it gets a lot darker, but my brain was still running on all those jokes and everything, and sort of this lighter, more fluffy movie that it starts out as. And then you're in this weird, like, dark nightmare winter wonderland / hell dimension, and I couldn't make myself take it seriously until like you got to the attic scene, which I won't spoil too much, but like by that time I was like, oh, like they're serious here, like people are actually getting offed left and right. Okay, I guess I just didn't buy it before then.
See, I think the tonal switch for me happened whenever the one girl was hiding under the I think it was a DHL truck. Like, it happened pretty quick, and that was like whenever it actually first kicked off, but I was actually waiting for that to happen. I enjoyed the comedy parts and everything. I enjoyed what they were trying to do in that part, and actually make some sympathetic characters and make some people that might not be that good that you can kind of root against. But in the end, they actually kind of made it so that everyone had redeeming qualities too. So,
which again was one of those things that, in theory, I thought was really strong. And I mean, I do think it's really strong. I will sing the praises of how the characters are handled in this movie, because you set them up as these sort of, not warring exactly, but it's, you know, the family thing where it's like, yeah, we put up with them because they're family and we share DNA, and just, you know, yeah, we know they're annoying, but they'll be gone. And like, then you get further into the movie and you realize that these people who have been painted with these really broad strokes and sort of caricatured almost are actual real human beings who, you know, have a more depth to them than is initially presented. And again, I thought that was a really great thing for the movie to do, but it just didn't quite hit for me in exactly the right way. And I don't know why. I don't know if it was a tonal thing where, because it was PG-13 and I knew it was PG-13 and I saw the jokes at the beginning, I just couldn't get my brain into the like, oh my gosh, this is like serious now mode.
Well, it's also a little bit harder to get fully into that mode whenever you can't tell if somebody actually died or not. Because like, you don't see like big splatters of blood, you don't see viscera or gore. You see violent things happen to the toys, but you don't really see much happening to the people. A lot of it occurs off screen. A lot of it's kind of implied. So like, to get that full tonal shift, you don't have like that splatter moment that a lot of horror movies do.
Yeah. And I don't think that you have to have the gore to make a scary movie, but you do need the tension. And again, this may have been just a personal thing, but for me, because of what was set up at the beginning, as seeing this as a comedy, as seeing these really sort of almost cartoonish characters, and then getting into like, oh, there's a thing jumping from roof to roof, and it like there's that great scene from the trailer which really kicks off everything in the movie, where the Krampus is chasing the girl under the DHL van, as you mentioned. That's a great scene, but I could not switch into, oh my gosh, there's some Christmas demon thing chasing this girl. I couldn't switch into that mode. Anyway, it was weird.
And I think the general audience will have an issue with that. Sometimes, like, you get stuck on the details. Like, I was able to make the transition, but it also, like, as soon as, like, the kind of storm settled over it, like, everything turned so dark. Like, every shot had, like, only that kind of light blue winter light that comes in. Like, there wasn't a whole lot of, like, of hope there. So, and that actually was kind of a theme of the movie, just how drained everything got after a certain point.
Yeah, I mean, yes, you're right. There is a lot of that. The and again, I thought that was amazing. Like that weird desaturated winter with it's like it's almost nighttime but not quite. Like you can still go out into it, but it's like you're literally in another world. All of the other houses have been emptied out, implied by the Krampus, but it's also sort of like this idea that you've just been transported into this other world where there's no other people except for just these families. Like that was really, really well done, and especially when you see them try to get out places. They have the Hummer and they try to go and get the trying to go to get help, and then you see that the thing makes that impossible. I won't go more into spoilers than that, but they're not just sitting in the house like, wow, what should we do? Like they act in a really realistic way.
Yeah, it's not a passive group of people. They are trying to do something, and I definitely appreciated that. They weren't just waiting to react.
And it was a great sort of range of reactions too, because you get that scene, if you've seen the trailer, the grandma kind of breaks down what the Krampus is and why he's coming and stuff, and they have a great sort of range of reactions from the one guy who's like, no, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, to the people who are like, yeah, I could maybe see that. And then, as things go on and they see more and more horror happening around them, they become more invested in okay, we have a giant demon Jack in the Box. All right. Probably there's going to be, which that was
it's like a
by
slug
far,
monster
like,
thing.
the standout monster.
Definitely. Like the gingerbread men were never scary. The angel thing was a little bit freaky, especially whenever it's like licking at the face and everything. But
I liked most of the monsters. The gingerbread men were a little bit comedic, but I mean, I got sort of a flavor of like Gremlins from them.
Yeah.
Which admittedly I don't love Gremlins.
I saw a lot of the Gremlins in this movie. Everybody kind of had their like that moment where they got to be badass. Like the mom did in Gremlins. Everybody got to have a little bit of that action, so that was kind of fun to see.
Yeah, and none of the, like, you start out with these characters who you don't really like. Especially, man, I was like, they don't take a long time to get to the Krampus stuff, which I think is a good thing, because in that opening scene that kind of set the tone and sort of threw me off a little bit, you really start to just be like, I hate all these people. But they don't. The smart thing that they did was they didn't stay on that for a long time. They set these people up, they painted them with those broad strokes, but they moved on to the real horror when we start to empathize with them more. And it could have gone a lot worse if if they let us sort of sit with these people and just be like, I hate you all. I hope everybody gets killed, get eaten by that weird Jack in the Box. I don't care.
Yeah, and I kind of thought that's what they were angling at, but everybody ended up having motivations that showed why they were the way they were. Like, even like the big like aunt that is definitely not a nice lady, who started having a few comedic moments in there too, like a few parts where you could empathize with her.
Well, she had the comedic moments, but she also had the moment where her thing is that she doesn't like kids. I mean, they're not subtle about it. She says, I don't like kids. Never have, even when I was one. But at the very end, she's like with the baby, like when everybody else is running off to deal with the monster, she's there like holding the baby, saying it's gonna be all right, it's gonna be okay, don't freak out. Like finding that maternal instinct that she never had. And we see that the sort of the redneck hillbilly people come in, and we see that nobody really wants to deal with the aunt, but that the one sister makes the point, like, I can't. Did you want me to just make her walk away and say no? I want you to spend Christmas alone in your trailer. And you see that these people are a family, and there really is a good theme there going through of, they sort of spell it out in the beginning that Christmas is about that sacrifice. And even when you're not enjoying it, it's about sort of making room for the people that maybe you wouldn't spend the time with otherwise, but they are family, and so you do sacrifice some of your time to spend with them.
Yeah. I was interested to see, like, most of these movies have someone who's like a complete coward that doesn't that's afraid to go and help, that's afraid to go out into the storm and deal with the monsters, things like that. This movie really didn't have that. Like, you see the dad who, like, whenever his daughter is abducted, it's like the first thing that happens in the trailer. Like, he's afraid, but he goes out there and he does what he has to do. Like, you see the redneck guy, like, I thought they might play it that he's overcompensating, and he's totally afraid he's not going to be able to use the gun. Like, everything came as billed in the beginning with him. Like, it was kind of nice to see that they didn't have to put that character in.
Well, and I think that was, again, part of the theme of the movie, is that the people that you hate do have redeeming qualities, and if you could just see them, if you could just look at them and get into, I mean, hopefully you don't get into this situation, obviously, but if you could just sort of sit in their shoes and sort of break down those barriers of pride and, the sort of the class, because there's the class barrier here too. It's about, the one side of the family is very, very wealthy, and the other family comes and they're not, they're the redneck hunting type. They have a Hummer.
Yeah, I was going to say, he had to have some level of wealth to have a Hummer, but you can also buy.
Well, they're not that expensive these days, Tony.
Yeah. They haven't been making them for years, so.
Unless it's a real Hummer, like a Army Hummer, which I don't know how much.
He might have been able to buy that from surplus too. Like, it could have 400,000 miles on it or something. Who knows?
But there was that dichotomy too of the richer family and the poorer family, regardless of how specifically accurate that was. The idea that the rich guys aren't just snobs and the poor guys aren't just like loudmouth jerks. Like, they all are human beings underneath their skin if they would just, be able to set aside their differences. And as a Christmas movie, as a movie that is a horror movie and yet has that message to tell, I think it really does it as well as it could. I take a few issues with the tone. But that was just me, and I think especially if you are a fan of practical creature work, because the Krampus, the Jack in the Box, the Christmas Angel, and there was another one. Oh, that weird teddy bear thing, that rabid teddy bear.
Was sinister. That was like one of the only gore moments you got to see. Like, there's some awesome stuff with the different creatures that happened. Like, what did you think of the actual Krampus? Like, I was a little bothered by him not talking very much and just doing like the heavy breathing thing, but I also thought the costume was really cool.
What did you want him to say exactly? I'm like,
I don't know.
I never thought at one point, like, I really wish he would like just stop and drop a monologue here. Or I thought he was better as a silent character, honestly.
It very well could be. I just thought that was a little bit odd. The elves were a little bit interesting, and that actually reminded me a lot of Brahms' book, like having the little helpers. Like, because they weren't the best creature effects, but they were still pretty sinister.
Yeah, well, I think it was just guys with masks on, but the masks were really, really creepy.
Yeah.
Really well done masks. And, they come in and they're like, yay! Just sort of like frolicking around. And that scene too, when they come in and you think like, oh, there's so many of them, and they're like, these guys are really screwed. And then they're just like, turn around and leave because their master is coming. That was cool. And that, I think, to answer your question, I thought the Krampus was amazing. I thought that creature was really well done. The I thought that they did a good job of not showing too much of him until like the very end. Like even when the grandma is talking to him at that one scene, they don't really show his face until you
Actually,
get to like further on in the movie and the kid interacts with him and it's just like looks right into his eyes.
yeah,
Um
that was a really good payoff for that because he's always in the shadow. It's kind of a trend that's happening more and more in movies where you make the flashback like animated, or was this animated or was this like stop motion? I couldn't tell.
I think it was animated.
Yeah. Either way,
I'm
it was
pretty sure it was
animated really
CG.
well. Like the style of that was really cool, and I don't know if it's cheaper than trying to build a bunch of old sets or if it's just more effective, but I kind of liked it.
Well, it did. For one thing, it would have been expensive, right? To show if they'd had to build a whole other European village set. I think that would have been a budget issue. I don't think this movie cost a lot to make, which is good because I saw you tweet out a picture of your completely empty theater, and I was in a theater with like 10 people.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I did go at 9:50 on a Thursday, so it
I
might
mean,
have
I
been
went at
that.
7:15 on a Thursday. I'm saying when I go to see The Force Awakens at 7:15 in a couple weeks, I fully expect the theater to have more than 10 people in it, Tony.
Yeah.
This is not going to have a giant broad appeal, but it may make back its money. I hope that it does because despite not absolutely loving it, I felt like that it was a solid entry and I liked what it was going for. I'm going to bring this up. I was a little bit weirded out by the whoever released it had a embargo on reviews that went like right up until 6 o'clock my time
Yeah. I remember
yesterday.
you were scouring the internet trying to find a review. And at that point I was just like, I'm not going to read anything because I don't want it to taint what I was doing, because I looked up the movie thing, and the New York Times was like, Krampus is the best story, but the absolute worst movie, and things like that. And I started, like, just that headline was enough to bother me and make me think, oh, okay, this might be a mistake. But I didn't read the article until after, and I just saw that they were nitpicking highbrow people that just aren't into horror.
Well, I'm a little bit of a nitpicking highbrow guy, but I am into horror. So, um, one of the, I mean, I like to read the reviews so that I sound smarter when I talk about things that I didn't notice myself. One of the things that one of the guys I read pointed out that I think if you're a cinematography fan, you might also find irritating was that they used a bunch of close-ups. Like there's a ton of times when the camera's just like right up in somebody's face.
Yeah.
And I read that review before going into the movie, and I was like, "Wow, they really do." And I think that that's one of those things that is better like used sparingly. Like it's a really effective way to sort of like punch an actor's emotion for the audience. But if you do it all the time, it can be a little bit, just sort of lose its effectiveness. But that's a nitpick for real. But I did want to ask you, Tony, without getting into spoilers, but how did you feel about the ending?
I I was thinking about it a lot as it was happening. It's really hard not to describe it with spoilers.
Do you want me to? I have thought about my answer to this, and
All right, tell your
okay.
answer and I'll think of
You
mine
can
while you
piggyback
talk.
off of this if you don't, and I'll try not to say too much spoilery. But as the ending was happening, I just was in my seat going like, "Oh no, you can't do that.
That was
No, you're
exactly
not
my
doing this. This
reaction.
is." And then like as I sat there and thought about it, I was like, "Well, wait a minute. If they hadn't done it that way, then they couldn't have done what they did." Like you have to end the movie in a certain way without being like a complete bummer. And yet the movie I don't want to, again, don't want to give too many spoilers, but it sort of has its cake and eats it too in a
Yeah.
way that my initial reaction was what this is a cop out. But especially as it played out and I got to the end and as I've had time to think about it, I really think that it was a better choice than they could have made. I don't know that it was the best choice, but I thought that it worked pretty well.
Yeah.
Although my first instinct was what?
Yeah, that was exactly my first instinct. And then, like, as things go on and you see what's really happening, it gets to be a little bit more interesting. It wasn't that I definitely did not hate the ending, like, afterwards. Like, I just wondered how you actually stick that and actually get it right. I'd like to see, like, someday if there's a DVD release, if they had alternate endings, if they had like the full on good ending, if they had the full on bad ending. Like it seems like they kind of landed somewhere in the middle. So
I
it
will
was,
say, and this is a tiny, tiny spoiler, but there is a jump scare in the movie, and it's the last thing
yeah,
right before the credits, and that was genius.
it's the requisite like scare people right at the end, and I think it's so dumb. I hate it so much.
No, you didn't like that?
It's so cliche now. Like every horror movie that comes out, especially like Blumhouse ones, has that. Like it's
Yeah, okay, but this didn't ruin the story, Tony.
no, it
Like
didn't.
this
Like there was
was
no
in
problem with
character.
it. Yeah. And there were like you could call some of the other things jump scares, but it wasn't the deliberate sharp pang of music after like silence and all that sort of stuff. I think I'm just a little bit tired of that last second jump scare. But it definitely my theater wasn't entirely empty by the time the movie started. There were two people that showed up late. But the girl that was there actually screeched a little bit at that, so it was effective for some people for sure.
I mean, I jumped. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't screech, but I was like, "Whoa, what?" Um, and I don't know, like the way that I mean, it's just like half a second, but I just love the way it was done and the way it brought some stuff back. I was really happy. I'm sorry you were not, but
Oh,
I
like
thought,
it didn't ruin anything for me. I was just like, oh, I see this coming.
oh, you did. You saw it. You were
It
anticipating
was
it.
too slow of a pan, too long of a
Okay,
scene.
okay.
So
We won't say anything else specifically,
yeah,
but we are in disagreement on the very, very ending.
yeah.
Um,
There's the ending, and then there's just the little ending. So don't take that to mean that the movie was bad. Just that little section didn't work for me.
but for me, I say if you're really picky, and I'm pretty picky, you may not love this movie. But if you like horror and you especially if you like creature effects, and it's not that that's all that's going for this movie, but it's one of the strongest things in the movie is the practical effects. Are really really well done, and it's not all practical. There's some CG stuff, but it works together I think pretty well. If you like that, it's not really. I mean, the weird thing for me was that although it was PG-13, like they made it fairly raunchy. You know, it wasn't like this is a family-friendly film. I would not have wanted to take any of my family to the movie. I mean, my wife went with me, but you know, like it's not like if I go to PG-13 Star Wars, I'm not expecting f bombs and sort of heavy swearing. I'm expecting sort of maybe fun violence and stuff. But this went sort of with that. I almost think that if they had gone rated R, they could have done more stuff and gotten away with more.
Yeah, it might
Uh,
end up making more if it was rated R because people are kind of tenuous about PG-13 horror movies.
yeah, which is usually a reverse. Like people generally say, well, you make more if it's PG-13 because of more people can see it. But none of the people. Well, I mean, it was 7:15 in the evening, so none of the people in my theater were below the age of 18.
Yeah. And as far as like the raunchiness, I wouldn't even call this movie raunchy. Like I think he says asshole once and there's kind of implied swearing in other scenes, but I didn't actually hear it.
The ant drops a full-on f bomb. Although, granted, the placement of that f bomb was wonderful. When the grandma says the thing, and then she says, "What does that mean?" and the ant
Oh,
answers.
that part. I remember that. Yeah, that would be an appropriate time to actually use that. So I don't blame her for saying it.
What do you want to give final thoughts on the movie, Tony?
uh as far as a Christmas horror movie goes, like a lot of times it's hard to work with a theme like Christmas whenever you're trying to make something scary and horrible. Like there's a few good movies like Silent Night, Deadly Night, and if I think we might actually end up reviewing that if I have my way sometime in December. Uh, but I actually I liked the movie as a whole. I liked the creature effects. I liked the acting. Like I never had a problem with any of the characters acting. Like the grandma seemed almost out of place at points, but you needed somebody to know what was going on. The main kid, like I thought I was going to be rather annoyed with him. Like he's the little dweeb with like the bow tie and everything. But like his love for Christmas, his understanding of the sacrifice, his interactions with his family, like he was very likable. I just thought it was a solid movie. Like maybe the redneck family or the dad especially was a little bit of a caricature, but if I went and talked to my uncle Rick, he's pretty much that guy.
Yeah,
So it
we all
happens.
know that guy.
Yeah. So I I would definitely recommend this movie.
All right. Well, there you go. Tony Southcott gives his stamp of approval. I give like 3/4 of a stamp of approval. If you are a fan of horror and you don't have to have the gore, especially if you like the idea of inverting Christmas and making it into something scary, but still keeping with the spirit, which I really did like. I think that this movie, while it does sort of do a dark Christmas take, it's very much still about, it's positive about Christmas. It's positive about family and togetherness and sacrifice and stuff. And it's not really, the idea ultimately is that the Krampus is not this complete evil demon. He's there to push us back into the right way, in the way that Santa's the carrot, the Krampus is the stick, and they're both trying to accomplish the same thing from different ends of the spectrum. So that I really liked, and I think that there is a lot of merit in this movie, and you should check it out if it sounds like the kind of thing you should check out.
Yeah, and if you have people in your life that aren't huge into horror, this is kind of a good transitory movie, because it's not going to scare the crap out of them.
Also, I would say, if you're a little bit on the fence, this is one that you probably can wait for on DVD, and I think might even be more enjoyable on the home screen. So I'm not trying to nerf their theater numbers by saying don't go to see it in the theaters, but if you're hesitant and you don't want to see it in the theaters, I would still not completely write it off, and do get it when it comes out on digital and comes out on DVD, because I think it's the kind of movie that's going to hold up and probably will find some long-term love on those formats in much a similar way that Gremlins has, and some of these other movies that maybe didn't get a massive theatrical run, but have become cult classics later.
For sure.
Does not stand up to Rare Exports, though, by the way.
Yeah, Rare Exports.
Rare Exports is like here, Krampus is like, up here.
I think that's just the level of fun involved, because like Rare Exports just was fun from start to finish. This movie was a little bit more serious in moments than that. So
anyway, thanks for watching, you guys. We will be back on Friday with your regularly scheduled episode of the Human Echoes podcast. Who knows what we'll be talking about? We haven't figured it out yet, but it'll be something awesome, and we expect to see you there. And go see Krampus.
For sure. You guys have a great day.
Bye.